Are you listening? Damn. Yeah.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Damn Podcast. I am your host, Angie Machado. Joined with me, as always, is Beaver Blitz beat writer Jake Hedberg. We both are congested. We've got some kind of cold thing going on, so just bear with us. We're here and we're ready to go. Jake, how are you?
I'm doing great. Classes are starting to get underway. A little busy schedule, but it's going pretty good right now.
Yeah, Jake's killing it right now because he's had this nice little honeymoon of fall camp in August and the first 4 weeks of the season where he had no class and it was like quiet. And now he has to go to class and try to fit in running around to interviews. But you're killing it, Jake. Appreciate you. We all appreciate you. Quick rundown of today's show. We were supposed to have a special guest. I was super excited. We were going to bring Easton Mascarenas on, Easton Mascarenas Arnold. He got us confused because he's doing something with Damnation, the NIL. Promised us that he would come another day. So you will be seeing him somewhere in the podcast world, just not on the Damn Podcast today because he is doing something with another Damn Nation. So all this damn stuff going on, Jake. Okay, but I want to give a quick rundown of the show. We're going to talk some smoke to the Big 12. Things are kind of heating up if you're paying any attention to social media and some of the YouTubers out there. So Jake and I are going to address some of that. Nothing to announce here, but we do want to kind of talk about kind of the latest things that have been rumbling going on. More importantly, we're going to talk about the big, huge win Friday night over the against Utah. Going to go over the Pac-12 and how they did, what they have looking forward to this week. Preview Cal, and then take some listener questions in the mailbag. Or if you have some, go ahead and drop them in the comments if you are listening live. So, Big 12 talk, Jake. Have you seen any of this, or have you been in class all day?
Yeah, I got done with class at 11:50, hustled over to Valley for the Coach Smith press conference, and then worked for a little bit, and then I checked Twitter, and all I'm seeing is smoke from Oregon State to the Big 12. And in my mind, it's encouraging that there's momentum building. Obviously, we don't know how reliable this is. But it's better than the last few weeks where it's just been more smoke to the Mountain West. So it's a positive sign, I think, to see this momentum start to build in that direction.
Yeah, so the latest that I'm hearing, and I've heard some things, it's not been as loud as maybe a few weeks ago, but Oregon State's not going to the Mountain West. All this talk about the Mountain West, I think, is very premature at this point. If the Mountain West was going to be the landing spot, it would have been the landing spot already. So there is... I know a lot of you guys, I know Carter did a lot with Locked On Pac-12 and Spencer. There is a Locked On Big 12 channel that has been putting out some really good work. They actually have a guy, and I hate like just doing this like, oh, this guy, his name is Immaculate. But he actually breaks down stuff and has broke down for the past couple days or couple weeks kind of where the smoke is coming from. And it's really intriguing. And I can't get all the way into it because I haven't done all the reading, but he's actually looked through the contract. He's like, I'm not really research. I'm just reading through the CFP contracts and such. There is some discrepancy about the change in the CFP, whether it's a per conference amount or whether it's a per team amount. But at the end of the day, there's potentially a nice chunk of money for Oregon State and Washington State if they remain the Pac-2 for 2 years. Okay, so they have that 2-year grace period to make some things happen. Even if it's a per team, there's still some decent chunks of money there from the bowl tie-ins and all of the inner workings there. So there's money over here. And then it was asked today, well, would that mean ESPN would try to make, say, the Big 12 take Oregon State and Washington State? No, it really has nothing to do with ESPN because ESPN will be paying that money regardless. Wherever, they have to give that money. That's all money being brought in from advertising revenue. Where they would get some pressure is from the other Power 4 conferences because they're sitting out there looking at this couple $100 million potentially, anywhere from, I've seen $150 million over 2 years to $320 million over 2 years. those conferences are looking at that saying, wait, if somebody just takes Oregon State and Washington State, then that big chunk of money gets distributed amongst those 4 conferences, not split amongst 5 with 2 teams getting the lion's share. That's where it's kind of coming from. That's where the smoke is coming from. It's still greed. It's still money. And that's, I think, where Oregon State and Washington State are being smart in saying, we can't make any decisions until we know what we're dealing with money-wise. That is what they owe, what they have, all of this stuff, right? So that is the major key piece. The other key piece that I think people overlook is that Kirk Schultz, president of Washington State, sits on the CFP executive board, and every vote has to be a unanimous vote. Kirk Schultz could be the complete the stick that clogs this cog, if you will, and could bring everything to a screeching halt unless Oregon State and Washington State are picked up. So aside from the fact that they just simply belong in a Power 5 conference, and I think we've seen that, Oregon State has demonstrated that, Washington State has demonstrated that across sports. That's what I know, Jake. Jake's been in class, so that's the kind of the quick down and dirty. If something happens, guys, know that Jake and I will jump on it and do an emergency pod to talk about it all. But that is kind of where we stand. Oregon State and Washington State aren't saying anything. I asked several of my sources down in Corvallis on Friday night, and they were staying very, very tight-lipped. So stay tuned. But know that we'll jump back on. Okay, so that's the smoke to the Big 12. Let's transition, because Friday night in Reser Stadium, if you weren't there, was electric. Jake, you were on the field before the game with me. We were down there when the flyover happened. The crowd was going crazy. Give me your initial thoughts of just the overall lead up and the atmosphere.
Yeah, I thought that last Friday, the atmosphere was absolutely electric. As from a student's perspective, that was one of the better atmospheres and better performances from the student section I think we've seen, at least since I've been in Corvallis. From start to finish, the crowd brought it, and I think they were a big part in giving Oregon State the early momentum. I mean, playing in front of such a loud and imposing crowd is challenging, and Oregon State helped, and that crowd helped Oregon State rattle Utah really right out of the gate. So I was super impressed.
Yeah, it was the lights. I know there's been a lot of criticism. A couple of weeks ago we had Sarah Elcano on. I thought they did a better job with the sound system. Everything. I mean, there's still been some criticism, but some people just like to complain too. So was it perfect? Probably not. But I think they did the best they could to make it better. We could hear it up in the press box that isn't even open. So, but you're right. The crowd was crazy. Jake is like a celebrity when we're down on the sidelines. You should walk the sideline with Jake. It's crazy. What went well, in your opinion?
I thought Oregon State's defense had their best effort of the entire year. Granted, Cam Rising wasn't playing, but I mean, the defense just played with the physicality that we haven't seen in a long time. I mean, it kind of reminded me of the older 2000 physical squads, and really from start to finish, Oregon State put their foot on the gas pedal defensively, and they didn't stop. There was a handful of guys between Ryan Cooper and Hobel Thomas who really stepped up back in the secondary. The linebacker core was great. The defensive line, again, continues to be really strong in stopping the run. And this defense is really just imposing. And for them to do that against a top 10 team was very impressive.
Yeah, so Gary DeBro says Cam Rising would have gotten injured again. The D was off the rails. I agree. I mean, that defensive performance was from the start. Those guys were ready to go. So and that was actually one of my keys to the game. I was on the radio, forget which radio station it was, but it might have been in Salt Lake, but they were talking about early in the week Cam Rising going. And my game plan if Cam Rising was to go after him, rush him, and make him move, make him be a little uncomfortable. So that I agree. I think that was the key to the game. I've seen some questioning of DJ again. Now, I thought DJ had a great game. I thought the offensive play calling was very good. It was almost like Coach Lindgren had checked out some of the blitz thought. I mean, I know they're opening up the playbook more. But I like that they got him in motion. But I think what Beaver fans are forgetting is just how good this Utah defense is. Utah defense was averaging giving up 51 yards a game. 51 yards a game. Oregon State had
131, I think.
131.
133, something like that.
Yeah, it was like 3 times what their average was. Utah had average giving up 9.5 points a game. Oregon State came in at 21. Yes, Utah had some injuries, but how often, Jake, is it that you say that Oregon State is going to out-physical Utah?
Yeah, I mean, I do think Oregon State does try and out-physical teams a lot, but against a program like Utah where they're arguably the most physical program in the country and a program that teams should strive to play like. And Oregon State really from start to finish on both sides of the trenches, offensive line and defensive line, they were the superior team. I mean, Oregon State held Utah to under 2 yards a carry, I think. And while we didn't run the ball like we typically do, we still averaged a little over 3.5 yards an attempt. And to do that against this stout front seven was very impressive.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, this was not going to be a game that Oregon State was going to, tally up a ton of yards. I mean, it was going to have to be take advantage of what you were given and get those chunk plays when you could. I thought going out to a 7-0 lead early was huge.
Mm-hmm.
Brian Miller said defense played like they were pissed. I loved it.
Yeah.
Yes, they had something to prove, and they came out and did it. I loved DJ running the ball. I also liked how they set up on that 4th down. The first time they had a 4th and 1, and they did the quarterback sneak where they all piled up in the position. Then the second time they did it, everybody was ready for DJ to run it, and he flipped it back to Silas, who broke free for another big run. So I love how they're setting plays up throughout the game. Were you surprised by this performance?
I was expecting them to bounce back, but I thought one thing I was surprised about was I thought DJ had arguably his best game at Oregon State, while may not statistically be up to par with his game against San Jose State or UC Davis, but those aren't top 10 teams. Those aren't teams that have had arguably one of the best defenses in the country over the last 10 years. And if you take away the one interception to Cole Bishop, DJ played a relatively clean game. He threw for over 200 yards and a touchdown. He looked much more comfortable. I feel like against Washington State, he was a little antsy or jittery, and against Utah, he just kind of had a moxie about him that we hadn't seen. And to do that against a top 10 team is a great sign, and I'm hoping he can carry that to the rest of the 2023 year.
I agree. And like I said, I saw some people on social media kind of giving him, or not giving him, but talking about that he's still, not playing to his potential. But against, like you said, a top, I think top 5 defense. I thought
they're still top 5.
Yeah. That performance. And like you said, he looked comfortable. He didn't have jittery feet. He stood tall. He did take some sacks. But at the end of the day, bounced back and made some good throws. Couple drops, uncharacteristic couple drops from
there was the one from
Anthony
Gould on the slant. Yeah.
But other than that, I thought big game by Josiah Irish. Of course,
that was the best
Silas
game
Bolden.
of Josiah's career.
Yeah, no, it was very. And then Munyagi had that huge 23-yard catch for first down.
I think it's really great to see other guys step up besides Ant and Silas. We talked about this last week. Was there going to be a third guy that steps up? And both Josiah and Reha, they both made huge plays. Josiah had a handful of them too, especially that catch on that dime from Childs. Yeah,
that was. And like you said, Reha. Beaver fans keep talking about wanting a bigger bodied wide receiver. He's coming in at 6'2". He's going to be a bigger target. Still doesn't see the tight ends as much as I thought we might, but they were able to get it done. And defensively, I do want to say Digital Dam just said the defensive line is his MVP this year. For all the talk about a lack of a secondary, it doesn't even matter because D-line was in the backfield. And that was something, Jake, that you brought up from the very get-go. And I don't know if everybody listened to the fact that this D-line is the best D-line we've seen at Oregon State in over a decade.
Yeah, at least. Yeah.
And for a position group that quite honestly has underperformed and been one of our biggest concerns for year in, year out, this is now the strength of the defense.
I would definitely agree. A guy I want to talk about in particular is Sione. I think that Lilo Hea has had a great year. He's in the backfield left and right. It may not show up in the box score, but if you go back and watch tape, number 8 is in the backfield a lot. And for Oregon State to have that depth at that spot between him and Chatfield, and then Takari Hickle as well, who is another promising younger player, it is amazing to see that after the Gary Anderson era, the end of the Riley era, and then the start of Jonathan Smith. It's great to see a defensive line that is a top unit in the country.
Absolutely. Here's another comment. Josh Gray did get beat very bad.
Yeah.
In fact, I texted my son who had to stay home sick, but he's playing defensive end right now in the JV high school team. Kudos to Josh Gray, who got beat so badly on a sack that you never did see 82 in the backfield again the rest of the game.
Yeah.
Very true.
That's another point. I thought Oregon State offensive line did a fantastic job. Jonah Ellis leads the country in sacks, and yeah, he got his. He had 2 sacks, but they were able to take him out of the game for the most part. And I think you saw that the offensive line's play rewarded too. Tanner Hiller was just named Conference Offensive Lineman of the Week, and for a kid like Tanner, who I think is still a walk-on, that's really incredible to see, and super happy for him.
Yeah, so if you haven't seen, Easton Mascarenas was defensive MVP, Pac-12 defensive player of the week, and Tanner Miller, as Jake said, was offensive player of the week, or offensive line player of the week.
Yep.
Very, very well deserved. I'm surprised Silas didn't jump in there either.
Yeah, Silas had a heck of a game.
He did, but I guess this is all voted on by the entire conference media, so there might have been some people that thought some other ones were more deserving. But no, I thought everything went about as good as it could for Oregon State. This coming week, they get Cal on the road for a 7:00 game, and it was just announced earlier today that UCLA, the homecoming/family weekend game, will air at 5 p.m. kickoff from Research Stadium on Fox. That's prime time.
Yeah, I do feel like it's interesting to see that. This is now 3 of Oregon State's first 6 games on Fox or CBS.
Yeah.
But apparently the Corvallis TV market isn't big enough to warrant a Power 4 conference. So.
Yeah, no, he's watching, if you ask,
Obviously no one's watching. But
Obviously. Brian Miller says, refs near the end, we're trying to keep the game going for Utah. Might just be orange-colored glasses, but I saw a little of that. It was more interesting. Jake, did you ever go back and watch some of the broadcast?
Like the Tim Brando broadcast, I have not watched with the radio.
There was a ton on my Twitter feed during the game about very pro Utah. It had a little slant, but the media maybe has a little bit to play here in the fact that they were part of the reason that Oregon State and Washington State don't have a home. So maybe we don't want them building them up and having them win. I don't know. I don't want to be tinfoil hat here, so we'll just kind of drop that. But there were some. But you know what? Utah could probably point to a couple calls that the refs made, but Oregon State did have 100 yards in penalties, 11 penalties for 100 yards, which is uncharacteristically high for them. A couple of those were targeting calls, so Oregon State will not have James Rawls or Calvin Hart for first half against Cal. I thought
which one of those losses do you think will be a bigger impact on the first half of next week's game?
God, they're both huge. Calvin Hart has come along so quickly, but James Rawls is one of those kind of quiet, just stalwarts on the defensive line. They're both going to have an effect, but luckily, and I don't say this to be disrespectful, but it's Cal and it's not Utah. Like if we were coming into this game, if Oregon State was going in to play Utah, it would sting a lot more than going against Cal. Or if it was an Oregon State offensive player, just because I think Cal's strength is their defense. So, no, we'll talk about them in a few minutes. But that's a good question. What would you say, Jake? I'm gonna flip it right back. Back at you.
To me, it's such a tough call because I feel like depth-wise, the defensive line's pretty strong. While Rawls is out, you still have Isaac Hodgins deciding the starting lineup, or Samisi Haluni. You may even see some more Chikari Hickle. And then but on the flip side, at the inside backer spot, I'm really excited to see how a guy like Melvin Jordan does and what will likely be his first start, because he's been very impressive.
Yeah, he has.
Jonathan Smith today wouldn't necessarily commit to him as a starter. John Miller, he's an experienced guy. He may get the start instead, but I would expect to see Jordan. And I'm excited to see him because he was a highly touted kid. He had a really good scholarship offer list, and he's looked pretty good in his limited action. But
I've been waiting for Isaiah Chisholm too, because he's the guy passed the eyeball test first, during fall camp. I do think, he's a true freshman. So obviously that is, just needing a little more time learning the system. But
at this point, I'm not sure if he's even going to redshirt. He has one more game. I think he's played in 3. It'll be interesting to see what they do, because they have a handful of guys who are kind of at that point between Childs with 3, Chisholm with 3, Card with 4, and Thomas Collins with 2. I think it'll be interesting to see how they kind of handle that, whether they go all in and play those guys and burn a year, or save it, have them spend the rest of the year in the weight room and develop. It'll be interesting to track that.
My opinion is, now in today's day and age with the transfer portal and with Oregon State's kind of up in the air, where they're going to be home, play them, because that's my opinion. Get them the reps.
That's my thoughts as well.
Kevin Klupinger, I hope I said that right, said defense did have a lot of calls against them. It reminds me of Erickson defenses. I would rather see that level of aggressiveness than DBs falling in front of the ball carriers hoping they will trip. Abso-freaking-lutely.
Yeah. It's better to be physical and penalized than be soft and get ran all over, in my opinion.
Yes. I completely 100% agree. Okay, who gets your game ball this week?
Yeah. This was a tough call. This was a tough call for me. There were really a handful of guys that I thought earned it and deserved it. I'm gonna give one out on each side of the ball. On offense, I'm gonna go to Silas Bolden. Kind of tough to go anywhere else on that side of the ball. It's a guy who had the best game of his Oregon State career, in my mind at least. He had 100 yards, 6 catches, a nasty touchdown, and then and running the ball too. He scored the 45-yard touchdown, and he had the longest 7-yard run I think I've ever seen in the fourth quarter, where he was just weaving through. Was
that Silas's first game where he had a receiving touchdown and a rushing touchdown? Okay, that's what
I believe so. Yeah. And then on defense, it was tougher. To me, there was a handful of guys between Ryan Cooper, Noble Thomas, Sione Lolohea, but I feel like Easton Mascarenas comes up top yet again. He's a kid who has been ready to start, arguably since he got to campus. He just had really good linebackers in front of him, and now that they're gone, it's his time to shine. And man, has he taken advantage of it? He had 9 tackles, a huge sack on 4th down, and then a red zone to stop a drive that if Utah scored, it would have made it a 1-score game.
That interception was huge. And
if
you haven't seen, he is playing with a club on his hand because he had that upsurgent season surgery on his hand. So he's playing with a big kind of a cast on his hand, and he still made that interception. Huge game. And like you said,
the second one too.
But it's such a critical juncture in the game and in field position. Huge.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I definitely think Oregon State has this next star linebacker there.
So I'm just going to give one game ball because I was super, super critical of the coaches last week against Washington State. And so my game ball is going to Trent Bray, because what he did in flipping that group, we knew that first half of Washington State was kind of an anomaly, but to flip it completely the other way and get those guys ready to play, huge. And like I said, so I will call out a coach. I will call it coaches when I feel that they are in the wrong and maybe haven't got their team ready to play. And I know some people on Twitter were not happy with that, but in my opinion, those coaches make a lot of money. They can take some criticism because it's on players too, but players have to make the plays, but coaches need to put them in the best position. And so I will also call them out when they have done something really good. So good job. And same to Brian Lindgren. I thought the game call for the most part, was super solid. So coaches get my game balls this week. I'm going to transition now. Do you have anything else you want to bring up about Utah? Huge win. Again, huge.
Win,
we cannot understate that. Beavs
Huge
back
win.
up to number 15 in the country. And then they have Cal. So we're going to look at
the road is there.
Yes. Yeah. So we're going to look at the week that was. So we start off with that number 19 OSU 21-7 win over number 10 Utah. Did you watch football all day Saturday?
I watched mostly in the afternoon and that night. Had a late start on Saturday morning. Was able to catch the second half of most football games, or of most games that morning. But I didn't even watch the Colorado game.
Okay, so that one was one. That's me too. Number 8 USC 48, Colorado 41 at Boulder. That game was like out of hand by halftime.
Yeah,
I ran to the store, and by the time I got home, it was almost over, and it was 48-41. Huge comeback by the Buffaloes. My thoughts on, Oregon State doesn't play USC. They play Colorado in Boulder. That could be a tough game. I still don't think Colorado's defense is that great. USC's defense is majorly suspect.
Yeah. I think if they want to compete for a national championship, Lincoln Riley has to make some sort of change, whether that's firing Alex Grinch or doing like an internal swap or changing the scheme, the system, just whatever it is not working, because they have shown Colorado is a decent offense, but Oregon held them to 6 points, and that one touchdown was in garbage time. USC giving up 41 to them is that puts their defense on the same level as TCU and Colorado State. And if you want to just imagine what an offense like Ohio State with guys like Marvin Harrison will do against you, it'll be just recipe for disaster. And I don't even have SC in my top tier of Pac-12 teams right now.
Yeah, I don't either. Their offense is electric, but
yeah.
And I don't know what they have talent, so I don't. It must be the coaching. But anyway, that was an interesting one. Like I said, I didn't expect it to be that close. Cal beat Arizona State 24-21. That was a little closer. After ASU got blanked by Fresno, I wasn't expecting that one.
Well, they scored 28 on SC though. I did.
They did. You're right.
Yeah, they did score. I watched the Georgia Auburn game instead during that time slot, but I did do a little box score, rewind or whatever you want to call it. And Cal, they're gonna try and run the ball on us. Jade Knott's a great running back. He's arguably the second best in the conference.
Quick fact. You probably remember this.
Yeah.
But Oregon State, it was between Cal and Oregon State for Jade Knott. Jade Knott chose Cal. Oregon State went all in on Damian Martinez. I think
they wanted them both because wasn't Dame already committed? And then they brought Jade Knott in. I'm pretty sure Jade Knott didn't sign with Cal till December, and his top two was us.
Okay. But I know that he was.
That's
top
what my
two
memory.
Okay.
Yeah, was Cal and Oregon State.
Oregon got down. It was a 6-0 early Stanford lead, but number 9 Oregon comes back 42-6 over Stanford. Both Cal and Stanford were home this weekend, and if you saw those games, there was no one there.
Yeah, but they deserve to be in a power.
They do.
They do. Conference. Yeah.
They do. They absolutely do, because their fan base is crazy and just
arguably
passionate.
The best in the conference.
Yes, and they will go to the ACC for no money because hey, we don't need money either.
And I don't know. I caught the first 3 quarters of that game, and everything I've seen from Stanford this year tells me that they are truly. I think they're the worst team in the Pac-12. Obviously, it's going to be a rebuilding year, but they did play Oregon hard in the first quarter. But after that, it was all Ducks.
It was. And then the game that was actually the one I had fun watching was the nightcap. Number 7, Washington at Arizona. Washington squeaked by 31-24, which surprised. I actually have Arizona in 4 weeks as kind of my trap game for Oregon State going down in the desert. But I still think Washington is the probably most complete team in the conference right now.
I agree.
Just what they can do offensively. They have some giant receivers too.
Yeah, I mean that was a fun game to watch.
It was.
I really enjoyed watching that, and I just think Washington, they're so deep, and it's always hard to go play at a school, with particularly those Arizona schools. A lot of weird things have happened down there, between top 10 teams, and Washington, they battled. They really held their own. They've got guys. Jalen McMillan, he didn't even play again, and they had a third guy step up. Jeremy Bernard, he had almost 100 yards. It's a scary team, and I think they're up there with the top 3-4 teams in the country right now, to be honest.
I agree, and I think Penix absolutely should be in the Heisman discussion.
Yeah, I think Penix should be the front runner at this point. He's done more against better competition than Caleb Williams has, in my mind.
Yeah, but no, I just think that they are such a complete team, and like you said, it's a very system-oriented team because they're having guys drop and they're able to plug new guys in.
Like their best receiver, he didn't even play I guess the last 2 weeks now he hasn't played.
So it's going to be, I mean, that game in 2 weeks, Oregon at Washington is going to be ginormous.
I'm excited to watch that. It sounds like College Game Day should be up
probably
there.
be up there.
It's
I don't know. If Beaver fans and Cougar fans are watching and it goes to Seattle, I don't know. Maybe there should be just a flood of Beaver and Coug fans up there because, game day, they don't seem to respect the Coug flag up there. Yeah. I don't know. Just a thought. Okay, we're going to take a quick break before we talk about this week in the Pac-12 and then Cal. If you're watching us live, we'll be right back. You're going to still see us. We just have to take a quick break for the podcast side of things. Okay, welcome back to the damn podcast. We had to take a quick break, but we are back to talk this week in the Pac-12. And so before I jump into this week, I do want to let everyone know, if you're listening and not a member at Beaver Blitz, now is the time to join tonight. So we are going live at Monday about 4 o'clock, couple hours, give us a few hours. I think they flip the switch at 9 p.m. tonight. We are offering 2 months for $1. So it's a great way to get you the next 2 months, which is football season. So get in the lodge, lots of information, and you can read all the VIP stories and all the VIP and message boards on all the other 24/7 sports network. Okay, Jake, let's talk about this week. Kind of a lighter slate of Pac-12 games, in that there's several buys, but we're going to kick it off. Number 15, Oregon State at Cal. OSU is currently a 9.5-point favorite. We'll talk a little bit more about that game, breaking it down here in a little bit, but it's dropped from 10 points. Oregon State was a 10-point favorite this morning, down to 9.5. What are your thoughts on that point spread?
Yeah, I do think this game will be a little closer than most people think. I do think Oregon State still covers the spread, but Cal is a very similar team to Oregon State in terms of the way they want to play football. They're a run-first team behind Jade Knott. Their quarterback position's kind of iffy at the moment. Haven't really seen a whole lot from them. And then defensively, they're strong. They have a really good run defense. They're holding opponents to under 100 yards per game on the ground, and that'll be a tough test for Oregon State. They have struggled in Berkeley. They lost a game that, if you look at talent and the records of those teams, Oregon State should have won in 2021. Weirder things have happened. I'm pretty confident Oregon State pulls out a win by 2 or 3 scores, but don't be shocked if this one is closer than anticipated.
Okay, so Oregon State's brother in all this, number 13, Washington State at UCLA. UCLA is a 3.5-point favorite in the Rose Bowl. How do you like this one?
Yeah, this is probably my favorite game, or the game I'm most looking forward to watch from the Pac-12 slate, at least. And I hope Washington State goes and beats the brakes out of them. This whole thing kind of started because of SC and UCLA, and I hope Washington State goes out and Cam Ward has another huge game. I think that UCLA at the quarterback position, we really don't know Dante Moore yet. He faced a tough test 2 weekends ago, and he struggled. And as Washington State showed against Oregon State, their defense isn't a slouch, and it'll be another tough test. And what I think it would be helpful for Oregon State as well, because they play them next week. If Washington State kind of takes the wins out of their sails.
Beats them up a little bit. Out
Yeah.
physical some. I guess I've just never seen UCLA as a real physical team, so I think that's going to be a really good matchup. Colorado plays at ASU. Colorado is a 4-point favorite on the road. You think Colorado runs away with this one?
Yeah, I think Colorado covers the spread for sure. I feel like Dion is going to kind of have his guys pissed off after 2 losses, and potentially we may see Travis Hunter. I know the time frame was 3 to 6 weeks, and this would be week 3, I think. So his addition would be helpful, and I just think Colorado's too talented at the skill spots for Arizona State to slow them down.
And last game of the week, so there's only 8 conference teams playing this week. Arizona at number 9, USC. USC is a 21.5-point favorite.
I think Arizona covers this game. I would not be shocked. I'm not going to outright and say it happens, but I'm not going to be shocked if Arizona upsets USC. I feel like regardless of who Arizona has at the quarterback spot, whether Jaden Delores is healthy or they roll with Noah Fafita, but Arizona's got some dudes with Jacob Cowling, Teatora McMillan, Tanner McLaughlin, the Colorado transfer.
Lamonis, Craig.
Yeah, Craig. They've got some guys. I don't know if they're – and they also held Washington to only 31 points. So don't be shocked if Arizona shocks the country on Saturday night.
Yeah, I agree. I think Arizona, like you said, they have some dudes, especially the skill position players. So it's going to be a fun one to watch. Again, Oregon State, the one most of Beaver Nation or everyone in Beaver Nation should be watching, number 15 OSU at Cal. That is a 7 p.m. kickoff. Mm-hmm. Again, make sure if you're not a member of beaverblitz.com that you do join. We are offering a 2-month for $1 promo. That kicks off tonight, Monday night, the 2nd of October at 9 p.m. Pacific time, and it runs through Thursday at 9 Pacific time, midnight Eastern time. Okay. Should we talk a little Cal?
Let's do it.
Cal Bears. I don't get too excited when I talk about Cal Bears. They don't really, get me super jacked up. But looking at their schedule here, first of all, every game in the Pac-12, I guess, is a big game, especially when it's the farewell tour, the Pac-2 farewell tour. So
the revenge tour.
The revenge tour. So Cal, let's look. I'm gonna read off their schedule for you. They first week beat North Texas 58-21, lost to Auburn 10-14, beat Idaho 31-17, which Idaho was leading a lot of that
17-0
game.
17-0 at halftime.
Yeah. They lost to the Huskies, Washington Huskies 32-59. And then this last week beat ASU in a close one, 24-21. Cal's defense is legit, but how much do you think it helps Oregon State that they've played Washington State and Utah, who I would say have better defenses?
Yeah, I do think that does help. It'll kind of take pressure off of Oregon State in regards to how it could have been if they played, say, USC and Colorado instead of 2 of the worst defenses, instead of 2 of arguably the 2 of the best 3 in the Pac-12. A matchup I'm really interested to watch is Damian Martinez against the Cal inside backers, because they have a pair of 2 studs, Jackson Sermon and Caleb Elrams-Orr, I think is how you say it. It'll be a tough test for sure, and I think Dame hasn't hit 100 yards in 2 weeks now, so I think he's getting kind of antsy to get back to that level.
Do you think his running has changed? I'm going off script here, but do you think Damian Martinez's running style has changed at all this year as to last year, or do you think just teams are focusing more on him this year?
I think it's a mix of both. I think he's looked a little more patient, trying to find the open hole rather than as a freshman, especially toward the start of his freshman year, he would kind of just put his head down and try and get as much yards as possible without waiting for a bigger hole to potentially open up. And again, I do think defenses are starting to hone in on him and stack the box and make Oregon State throw the ball, and that may diminish his stats, but I think if it results in wins, there's not much to be upset about.
Absolutely. It was funny after the game, after doing the video interviews and things, I stayed in the football center to work a little bit and came out, walked around, and he snuck out because Jake, everybody waits, like
Yeah.
their families and friends and all the fans and kids are waiting outside. He snuck out the side door, kind of snuck out into the night. So, okay, what stands out besides those inside linebackers? What stands out when you look at Cal?
Yeah, shifting over to the offensive side of the ball, there's quarterbacks at there's question marks at the quarterback spot. That's really what stands out. Sam Jackson, the TCU transfer, was named the starter at the end of camp, and he's a guy who was a highly touted kid, was committed to transferred from TCU. I said that already. And then he got hurt in game 1, and Ben Finley took over, who transferred from NC State, I believe, and he didn't look super great. I feel like if Jackson played, they may have beat Auburn. But they had been kind of splitting time against Idaho and Washington, and then Jackson started and played the whole game against Arizona State. Haven't seen too much from him yet. They do have a really good receiver for him to throw to in Jeremiah Hunter, but I don't think he's faced a front seven necessarily as good as Oregon State's yet. You could make an argument that Washington's is good, or is almost as good, but I think Oregon State's is better, and I think they're gonna have a real opportunity to rattle them right out of the gate.
Is that your game plan? Like, kind of attack early, put pressure on early?
I mean, it's a younger quarterback. He's a more inexperienced guy, has 2 or 3 maybe career starts. And I would imagine Trent Bray is aware of that, and he's going to try and take advantage of that by applying pressure, trying to throw him off his game. Just rattle him.
I'm just going to make a quick point here for all of you guys watching live. If you have any questions for the mailbag feature, we're going to be jumping to that here in a few minutes. So make sure to pop those into the comments. So what does Oregon State then have to do on the defensive or on the offensive side of the ball to come out with a win?
Yeah, again, I think they have to establish dominance in the run game early. The Cal defense is good. Their Cal run defense is really strong. And Oregon State, they want to run the ball. That's what this offense is built to do. They're not built to play from behind. While DJ has looked more serviceable, Oregon State's not going to stray away from their bread and butter unless they have to. And I think if you get guys like Damian Martinez and Deshaun Fenwick, who had kind of a rougher game this last weekend, if you get them going early, then you should just dominate all game.
Do you think they cover the spread, the 9.5 points?
Yeah, I think they cover. I think they win by 17 to 21 points. I'm just saying it could be closer if Cal does take away the run game.
Road games are just tough. I mean, that's Eric's big thing when we start doing our staff picks and things. He always is, road games. It doesn't matter who you're playing on the road in the Pac-12 is tough. I do think the home field advantage is maybe a little well. Okay, so I will say this. I was going to say it's less intimidating when you're at Cal or Stanford. However, I've talked to OSU coaches who say it's almost
weirder
worse.
It's quiet.
Yeah, because it's quiet. It's like walking into a morgue, and so you have to create your own energy, which you do on the road anyway. But there's nothing really to get you fired up. So it is a different atmosphere in that there is no atmosphere, and that can be tougher. So that's something I think Oregon State's going to have to be ready for, and bring their own energy to this game.
Yeah. And, circling back to Cal, to me, it's they're a tough team to kind of get a read on.
Yeah, I agree.
They barely beat Arizona State, who appears to be in the bottom 2 teams in the conference. But then they hang with Auburn, who almost just beat the number 1 team in the country. And there's an argument that can be made that Cal could have or should have won that game too. So I believe – was that a home game? I think that was home for Cal. But still, that's to almost beat an SEC team that almost beat the number 1 team in the country. It's impressive for them, but it's just really odd and confusing to me. And
they're
the right read.
They are a hard one, and I do respect what Wilcox has done. Yeah. I do think his defense will be ready to play, but you're right. I don't really know what to expect from their offense, and if Oregon State, though, if their defense plays like they did against Utah, they can beat anybody in the country.
I would agree with that. I think that for the defense to bounce back the way that they did this last week was very promising. Because, a lot of teams very well could have just rolled over after giving up over 500 yards in a game. And they gave up what?
198.
Less than 200 even.
Yes, 198 was the total that they gave up to Utah.
And they didn't have Barnes and Rising, but that's still a top 10 team. And they almost pitched a shutout too.
Yeah. No, it was a masterful. But Oregon State, I do feel that they always have matched up well. Even under Riley, they've matched up pretty well with Utah in that they kind of do the same thing. They're kind of playing mirror images. But yeah, I think this one's going to be a really interesting one on Saturday night down in Berkeley.
Another thing I'm interested to see is, do we see Aiden Childs again?
Yeah, I bet we do. I just have this hunch that they're going to get him designed.
I think they're going to get him in each, or try to at least get him in each game for a series or two. Because if you're trying to save the red shirt, you don't put him in against a top 10 team at that point in the game.
Yeah, that was a designed plan. To me,
the plan, and obviously Jonathan and the coaching staff won't outright say it.
Yeah.
At least in my mind, they wouldn't, but I don't see him redshirting.
He's already played his 4 games, right?
He's played in 3.
3, okay.
So he can play in 1 more.
Gotcha. Okay. Are you ready for some damn questions?
Let's do it.
Okay. We'll jump right here. Brian Miller in the live chat has a question. Has there been any update on when we'll see Alton Julian back on the field? I saw him. He was completely suited. Yeah, he's fully cleared.
He's played in 2 games this year. I just think at this point he's not fully back up to the same speed he was 2 years ago. And at the safety spot, Oregon State's got some guys. And to come off an injury like that after 2 years, it's going to take time. So I do expect at some point in this season, or maybe even next season if he applies for a medical red shirt, that you'll start to see more of the 2021 version of Julian. But I don't think he's back to that level yet, which is very understandable.
I mean, you have an ACL and then, from what I've heard, re-injured it. Yeah. And then had to have it cleaned. So, there's got to be some mental stuff at play, just like what we were talking about Cameron Rising, too.
It's tough to come back. Yeah.
You had knee surgery. Yeah.
Yeah, a small one. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to jump on Beaver Blitz here in the lodge to get some of the questions. Beaver Fanatic 123 said, with Calvin Hart and James Rawls serving first half suspensions, who replaces them in the starting lineup? Kind of talked about that earlier.
We kind of touched on
Jordan? I'm going Melvin Jordan.
I think it'll be Jordan. And
Hodge.
Rawls, I think it'll be a hand. I feel like the defensive line already rotates a lot. Yeah. That's kind of been a theme I've noticed this year compared to last year, how it seems like almost every other play they're rotating in Golden and Rawls for Lolohea and Hodgins or Chatfield or Saluni, or there's just a ton of pieces that fit on that defensive line. And I think it'll be a hodgepodge of guys that kind of mix it up in there.
We kind of addressed this too in the live chat. Kevin Klupinger asked, will the 2 targeting suspensions for the first half affect defensive performance? I said no.
I don't think it will. The one thing it will affect potentially is the run defense, because Rawls and Hart are a big part of that. And Jay Knott, that's what Cal wants to do. You may see them lean on that more heavily in the first half and the second. But I wouldn't be too concerned. I feel like Oregon State's got depth at those spots that they haven't necessarily had in years past.
So Beefs Fanatic 123 also asked, Noble Thomas looked good in his last game versus Utah. Do you think he earns the CB2 spot opposite Jaden Robinson, or do you think we will continue to see Ivy and McCoy rotate through that spot?
Yeah, well, Noble wasn't even playing corner originally. He was playing nickel back.
Nickel, yeah.
And then Coop slid out from that spot to corner. But then when J-Rob went down, Noble slid out to corner and Josiah Johnson stepped in. And to me, that was telling, because they could have put in Tyrese or Jermod at that corner spot in place of Jaden Robinson. But by sliding Noble in, it kind of tells you that they trust a guy like Josiah Johnson at nickel more than they trust a guy like Tyrese at corner. So for me, that kind of leads in mind that Thomas has that nickel back job locked down now that he's healthy, and you're going to see more of Ryan Cooper at that corner spot.
Yeah, that was and hopefully J-Rob's back. But did Smith say anything? I have not seen his.
No, he did not.
Okay. It was a hamstring. He did say on Saturday night. So hopefully he
I would
didn't expect it to be major.
Yeah, I would imagine he'll be fine. And even then against Cal, with their passing game not being to the level it was when like Jared Goff and Davis Webb were there, I feel like if you have Thomas and Cooper at corners, you're going to be more than comfortable.
Mr. G. Gray says, if you are the Beavs PR person, what is the first thing you recommend to tell the story of how awesome OSU is and why the nation should care about them? It's a good one.
That's
a thought-provoking question.
I know. I gotta.
Because there's so much awesomeness about Oregon State.
Yeah. To me, it's just the atmosphere, like the family atmosphere, like everyone. I don't know. It's just an atmosphere that, like, I feel like, obviously I haven't been to too many college campuses. I've really only ever been to Oregon besides OSU, and it just feels different down there. Like, it doesn't feel like home or like anything like that. So I would.
Hey, but they're built on substance, Jake. Don't forget.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
No, I've been around a lot longer than you, obviously, but yeah, I think you're right, and I think who I think could tell the story. He wouldn't want to, but I think Jonathan Smith. If you didn't tell him that you were telling,
that's a good story.
No, I mean it's a good story in its own right, but I think if you were like what Oregon State started to do during fall camp, where they had those little videos, kind of behind the scenes, and they had Jonathan addressing the team. Mm-hmm. That I think is what you do. You have Jonathan telling that story. You have Mitch Canham telling that story.
Yeah, it does seem like a lot of notable figures in Oregon State sports nowadays are Oregon State alums, which I think that in itself kind of speaks to how once people get here, they don't want to leave. They want to stay and be around this place.
Like you said, it's family. It's their kids running around at practice. It's more than just football. And I think that's something too that Oregon State needs to maybe do a better job too, is to talk about how strong the other sports are. I know they had a graphic circulating about the Elite Eight and the College World Series and kind of all
Final
the things
Four.
The Final Four, all of it. But I think that's more of the story as well, that it's not just a football program. It's all. But I do think if it was me, like Jake said, I would totally focus on that whole family dynamic. And like I said, whether it's, when you're at practice, when you're at fall camp and, the coaches are at their office all day long, every day, night, but they bring their kids by practice and you see the coaches chasing their little kids running around, and there's a lot there. So that's what I would do. I would concur. How did you like Jonathan Smith's milk the clock signal? That was bad. That was bad.
He kind of touched on that on in today's presser. He was like, "I'm sorry to anyone I may have offended." Which it was pretty tough to keep a straight face. So I wasn't aware of that till like half an hour after the game.
It was
Twitter. I see that.
We were waiting for the press conference to start after the game, and it was all over Twitter, and I was like, what is he doing? And Eric sitting next to me, he's like, I think he's milking the clock. And I'm like,
it's pretty creative. Like,
it is.
How many coaches would think of that?
But he was even saying that he didn't have the right signal down, and the offensive coaches were giving him crap because he didn't have the right signal down. But I don't know. Do you want Jonathan Smith on your charades team if you're playing?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I don't think I would have thought of that for milk the clock, but hey, that's pretty funny.
Okay, so Reeser 23 has a couple questions. Did OSU size the stadium correctly with the new West Side?
That's tough because I feel like it looks really nice, but at the same level compared to the rest of the current Power 5 schools, it is on the smaller side. Washington State's really the only one that comes to mind that's smaller off the top of my head. I'm sure there are still schools that have smaller ones, but I feel like it's built for them to be able to expand on it. If that makes sense. Like, there's room for expansion. There's room for
south end zone. You could,
I feel like there's room for it, and don't be shocked if it does end up happening, depending on what happens in terms of conference.
But what I will say is what they've done between the 2005 or 2006 opening or 2005 opening, and this side, it's beautiful.
Yeah,
Beautiful
I mean,
stadium.
it feels pretty weird having the old side or the old side be the old side now because to me, like growing up as a kid, I was like, oh, it's always like so
The
much
new side.
nicer than the other side. And then now it's like if I'm like walking around the stadium before a game, I'm like, oh,
Going to the old
isn't what
side.
it? Yeah, let's go to the old side.
Besides the Pac-12 title game, what bowl game would you be excited about to attend this year?
I mean, obviously the Rose Bowl, but that's a college football playoff game, and there's no conference tie-ins there, so I'm not really sure how that would work. In terms of bowls with a tie-in, I'd enjoy the Holiday Bowl. I've never been to San Diego. I've got a couple friends that just graduated that stay there now, so that'd be a cool place to check out for a few days.
Yeah, I think the Holiday would be fun. I think the other one that I would love to see the Beavs go to is the Alamo.
Yeah, in my mind, as long as it's not the Sun Bowl, we'll be good.
No Sun Bowl. Vegas
Don't
was
wanna go
fun.
back
I mean,
to El
Vegas and
Paso.
LA, but they won't take us back. I mean, Vegas wouldn't take us back a second year.
I wouldn't mind Vegas.
But hopefully the Beavs are in a big bowl because
fingers crossed for Alamo Fiesta, something along those lines.
Yes. Okay, he has a couple more here that are kind of fun ones. Best OSU uniform combination.
For me, like current or all time?
All time. Let's go all time.
Those Fiesta Bowl throwbacks.
Now, I was going to say the Fiesta Bowl are all black. Fiesta Bowl ones are my favorites.
I kind of want to see him do a road Fiesta Bowl throwbacks with those black helmets.
Yeah,
with
the white jerseys.
Retro logo, the white jerseys, and then the black pants. I feel like that would be a pretty clean and crisp look.
Yeah, that would be. But what do you think of the orange? So current uniforms, what is your favorite?
Black, orange, black.
Okay.
I like that. One thing that I think would be super cool if this is the last Civil War, the Ducks just dropped their throwback jerseys.
Throwbacks, yeah.
The yellow, green, yellow. They could go that, and Oregon State could throw out the retro Fiesta Bowls for the last edition. I feel like that'd be pretty cool.
That would be pretty sweet. That would. Or even, so I think the Fiesta Bowl uniforms, I like the black, black, black. I think those are just so sharp. But for road uniform, I've never been a all white uniform fan. So
Me neither.
I like the Fiesta Bowl, the black, white, black. But I will say that the creams are actually okay. But the orange looks sharp. I thought the orange did look.
It looked better than I thought. At first,
sometimes the orange can look red, and it didn't look red this time.
At first, when I first heard about that, there's a possibility they might be wearing all orange. I was kind of afraid they'd look like those Chicago jerseys from, was it last weekend, 2 weekends ago?
I think so,
I hated those ones. So I was like, as long as they don't look like that, we'll be good.
So, and his last question is, what food item are you most excited, or were you the most excited to try on Beaver Street?
On Beaver Street, I've only ever had the tacos, and those tacos were very good. So,
I haven't tried anything on Beaver Street. I did try a burger one time that I shared with Eric up in the press box, but nothing. I mean, it was good, but it was a burger. It wasn't the tacos. I think would be good, but then you have to go wait in line for all of it, and we typically have more work to do.
It's too long to wait. Yeah, way too long to wait.
Okay, so Jake, we've managed to talk an entire hour again, and I'm sorry we were supposed. Like I said, I said at the start of this that Easton Mascarenas had told me he was jumping on with us today, and I was super excited. And then there's a little mix up because he had Damn Podcast and Damn Nation mixed up. So he had already committed to doing something with the Damn Nation NIL. And so he promised that he will come back in the next week or two and join us on the Damn Podcast. So, but Jake and I were able to handle lots to talk about. Keep your ears open for this whole conference realignment. Again, if you're not a member of Beaver Blitz, jump on our 2 months for $1 special. That gets you the whole rest of the football season for $1. It's a no-brainer. Jake and I will be back, though, next week on the Damn Podcast. So next Monday at 3:30. Check us out one more time next week.